Revenge films.
A few years ago, I got married to my wife, Karen, and just 6 months later, she cheated on me. I happened to come across the scene of the affair when I came home from a business trip, but until I saw it with my very own eyes, I hadn't noticed it at all, especially because my wife hadn't shown any signs that she was cheating on me, and I didn't even feel like she might have been either. On that day, I was about to wrap up my business trip early, and I was returning home one day early. My company also told me that I could go directly home without stopping by the office. So I thought that it might be nice for my wife and I to go out to dinner together somewhere. So I called her on my way home. But then my wife didn't answer the phone, so I thought that if I just went home, I was sure that she would be there. So I got off the plane and headed back home. I stopped by the convenience store on the way home to get some cigarettes, and along with that, I also purchased my wife's favorite dessert to surprise her with. However, when I arrived home, there was a car that I had never seen before parked really close to our house. I thought that it was bothersome parking, but I didn't think too much about it, and I ignored it and went straight into my house. But when I walked into the front door, there was a pair of men's shoes that I had never seen before, and I knew weren't mine. So I quietly tiptoed into the house and went further in without making a sound when I started to hear noises coming from the bedroom. I didn't even have to open the door because the voices were echoing through the door, and there was no mistake that the woman's voice coming out of the room was Karen. At that very moment, I felt the blood rush to my head, but instead of barging into the room, I went straight to the kitchen and I grabbed the kettle that was on the kitchen counter. My wife and I loved coffee, and because it was a pain to boil a new kettle of water every single time, we pretty much always had the kettle filled with water, and even though it wasn't boiling, there would always be hot water in there. I grabbed the kettle in hand, and then I barged into the bedroom. As soon as they saw me, my wife shrieked, and then the men started to scramble and tried to run away. And so, I took the kettle full of hot water, and I dumped it all over them. That's so hot! That's so hot!
I'm going to get a burn! Ouch!
And the two of them fell back into the bed. To be honest, the water was kept at a temperature for coffee, so it wasn't boiling hot water that would cause any burns. But I can imagine that the two of them felt hot water being poured onto them and went into a panic. While they were panicking, at the moment, I grabbed my wife's cell phone, and then I also found the man's wallet and cell phone. And I made sure to get a photo of the two of them butt naked in bed still. And then, when I looked into his wallet, I found one of his business cards with all of his company information on it, so I pulled that out. I took out his cell phone, and I went through the contacts list. There, I found a contact titled Wife, so I immediately pressed call. When he saw what I was doing, the guy turned completely pale and kept begging me to stop, but I ignored him and let the phone ring. After just a few seconds of ringing, the woman answered, and I looked back at the business card, confirmed the man's name, and asked if she was his wife. She very quickly answered yes. That was when I informed her that her husband and my wife were having an extramarital affair, and I asked her to please come to the address that I was about to send to her phone. She sounded shocked, but the wife agreed to come to my house. I hung up the phone, and then as proof that I was telling the truth, I sent a photo of my wife and this man naked in my bed directly to his wife. Then I finally turned to Karen, and I asked her if she had any excuse for this, to speak up. But then my wife started saying the standard excuses for an affair, almost like she was reading off of a template. She said that I was the only man that she truly loved, that she just got a little bit lost and had the devil overtake her, and then she desperately tried to beg me to forgive her, as she was panicking. I pretended like I was listening to her as she was begging and begging, but during that time, I was still on the man's cell phone and messaged his wife once again. I asked her to please contact his parents, and to bring them with her to this address. On the other hand, I also messaged my wife's parents from her phone, and informed them that Karen had cheated on me, and to please come. While half listening to my wife's excuses, I then reached into my wife's purse. Inside of her wallet, I found multiple point cards and membership cards to love hotels. And not only that, but I also found contraceptives in there. And then, as if I was pulling out of my magic hat, I dropped them out in front of them, one by one. My wife was completely pale. And this time, the man tried to start coming up with excuses, saying that they only had a physical relationship and that there was no love between them. And then he tried to tell me that because of that, it wasn't an affair, which made no sense at all. Unfortunately, in this world, an affair also involves a physical relationship between a married person and someone who's not their spouse. The two of them stood there continuing to make excuses, and so I finally spoke up. Honestly, I don't really care, but why don't you two at least put on your clothes? Regardless of the situation, don't you think it's going to be embarrassing to be butt naked when your parents show up? When I said that, my wife and the man instantly went into even more of a panic.
What? What do you mean? What do you mean when our parents show up? Wait a minute. Don't tell me that you called my parents!
What do you mean, parents? There's no way that you should be able to call my parents here! I sure did. I've already sent the photo of you two in my bed to both of your parents. And I've already asked your wife to call both of your parents as well. That was a few minutes ago. So I'm sure they should be arriving any minute now. When I said that, the two of them panicked and put their clothes on as fast as possible. When they finished, in perfect timing, the doorbell rang, and my wife's parents were the first to arrive at the house. But not long after them, at almost the exact same time, the man's wife and his parents also arrived. Perhaps my wife knew that she couldn't face her parents, because even though we were all in the same room together, she couldn't look up or look them in the eye. And perhaps the man couldn't face his wife or his parents either, because he was also looking down, avoiding all eye contact. The atmosphere was tense, and the first thing I did was address the man's wife. I asked her to confirm that this was in fact her husband, and with cold eyes, she glared at him. Without blinking, she quietly replied that there was no mistake that it was her husband. Now that I had confirmed that, I then turned to the wife and his parents, and I apologized to them for coming all this way. Then I explained the sequence of events, how I had come home from my business trip, and I happened upon the two of them in the middle of their affair on my bed. And the blood rushed to my head, and without thinking, I had poured the hot water that was in the kettle of coffee all over them. Luckily, I don't think that they have any burns or injuries from it, but I'd like to apologize about it first. I'm terribly sorry for doing that. But then my father-in-law spoke up. No, we should be the ones apologizing to you. You've been working so hard for our daughter, and yet we can't believe that this is what she's done. We are terribly embarrassed of her. And then the man's wife and the man's father continued on.
I think my husband did something that was very deserving of having hot water poured onto him. If anything, it would be fine if you give him a burn, because of what he has done is completely unbelievable.
What our daughter-in-law is saying is absolutely correct. I cannot believe what our son has done. We are so terribly sorry. Please, collect anything that you wish. We will accept it. After they said that, the two of them were panicking even more. But I disregarded them and said, in that case, that's exactly what I'll do. First of all, this is a given, but I'll be getting a divorce from Karen. And because this house disgusts me now, I'm going to put it up for sale. As for the settlement fee, I'll be collecting $40,000 from Karen. And for this man that she's been having an affair with, I'll be collecting $40,000 more. And through my lawyer, I'll be sending his company an official notice of the incident. Hey, wait a minute! Stop! If you do that, then I'll lose my job!
Please, go right ahead. I'm going to be getting a divorce from this man anyway, so whether he get fired or not is none of my business. And as for the settlement fee, I will be receiving that out of your savings that you had before we got married.
You're kidding me, right? If I pay a settlement fee to both of you, then all of my savings will be gone!
You're an adult. Surely you know that if you have an affair when you're married, then you're gonna have to pay a fine for it. You don't need a son like this anymore. We're disowning you.
Yeah, that's right. We don't need a son like you, who can't even tell what's right from wrong and embarrass us like this. The man's parents declared that they would be cutting him off from the family, and then they turned to me and told me to do as I wish with him, and then they walked out the door. And then the man's wife also said that she would be packing up her belongings and leaving, and as she tried to storm out, the man panicked and he chased after his family out the door. All that was left was my wife and her parents, but my wife wasn't giving up.
Please, it was just this once. Please forgive me. I swear I'll never do it again.
She was begging to me. But of course, I had no intention of listening to any more excuses, so I ignored her words, and I went to start packing up my belongings. Then I informed my in-laws on what I intended to do after this, and I left. There was no way that I would ever be able to sleep in the same room that my wife was having sex with another man in. After that, I heard from my former in-laws that they also disowned Karen and cut off all ties with her. Actually, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law were both once divorced when they got remarried to each other, and that was when they gave birth to Karen. However, they've both gotten divorced in the first place because they were cheated on by their partners, and so there was no way that they would ever forgive Karen for having an affair. After being cut off by her parents, I had a lot of missed calls from Karen, who was desperately trying to get back together because she had nobody else to rely on. But I ignored all of them, and through my lawyer, I succeeded in getting a divorce. Of course, I made sure that she was going to pay a full settlement fee, as well as the man she was cheating on me with. Karen no longer had a place to live or a place to go, and I heard that she's now moved into an extremely old haunted apartment building, and barely getting by. As for the man, of course, he was also divorced by his wife, and even though he wasn't fired from his job, he was relegated to the storage room down in the basement, without any sunlight or people to work with. That was the time when I fully experienced what it means when people are pushed to the edge. Well, I hope I never have to go through that ever again, though.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.